challenge thing of like ship something in 30 days?
It's ship an atomic essay is what they call it every day for
Oh.
30 days. And so it's
Oh, yeah, okay.
200 to 300 words. They use a
Mhm.
service called TypeShare, which is kind of interesting. But you've probably seen them where it's like when you write out something, it'll create a image of that text and then it'll tweet out that image of the essay because you can't do a
Mm.
tweet of 200 to 300 words.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, gotcha. Okay. That's
so
interesting.
yeah, if you go to my Twitter page, like the last 6 posts I've made have those atomic essays in them. I would need to do a better job of
Mm.
sprinkling in other content with it. But
Well, I
yeah,
noticed
it's
that you had posted some stuff recently that like more than I think you had been.
yeah, yeah, and that's why is and the really the community it makes the biggest difference
Yeah.
more than anything else is so what they do is they say like you can share your post within a specific channel. They're using Circle to drive everything. But they also have an official Twitter list, which I haven't gone through. And they're like, go and find other people that are doing this and comment on their stuff. Even if they're not in your
Mhm.
industry, just like try and like talk to them.
Yep.
So I've gotten maybe, more followers that way from expanding the community that way. But anyways, that's been like really encouraging, being like, okay, these people are ex expecting I say
Yep.
expecting. So, Jason, my manager at work, he did it maybe a year ago, and he's gotten a couple me and Trevor to do it as well, and he's, like, in their elite group, and so he's, like, texting me on the sly that, like, "Hey, you haven't posted today," and just that level of accountability really makes all the difference.
That's what we were talking about and the boot camp thing, like pretty
Mhm.
informal to start, but talking about doing like daily check-ins just in text and having like a weekly video or voice check-in
Yeah.
and having specific goals and like treating it like stand up, but also from a knowledge share perspective
Uh-huh.
of just being around people that are talking about content and challenges and tools and all that sort of stuff on a
Yeah.
regular basis be super useful.
I'll be part of it. Oh.
Yeah.
'Cause, yeah, a lot of the stuff I'm doing, I feel like I can kinda double dip and
Hmm.
include it, but,
Yep.
I'm also happy to share some of the knowledge and stuff that I'm learning.
Yeah. Yeah. So the goal, what's up, Goose? Speaking of other content
Yep.
creators in Discord. So the
Other
goal,
Zeal people.
yeah, there's Zeta people as well. So I sent an announcement in Discord today of saying like we're gonna try to do a group of 5 to 10 people. DM me if you're interested. Have no idea how many I will get,
Okay.
but I will
Well, I was
add your
gonna
name to the
say,
list right now.
even if what you wanna do is, like, you say you have, like, 20 people and you're like, "I wanted to keep it to groups of 10," I can lead a group of 10 and you can lead a group of 10 if you wanna do it like that.
Well, that's specifically the goal longer term is
Okay,
like let's try something, let's see how it goes. If we have more interest, then try to scale it out and specifically be able to have leaders to run that sort of stuff. And that's
cool.
what like Becca with Virtual Coffee, I think, has
Mm,
done such an
cool.
amazing job of because they have so many events and she's only one person. They also like her and Dan started it, but they have leaders within the group who like lead different initiatives or
Oh,
events. And
that's
that's
awesome.
like
Yeah.
such a good scalability thing. Speaking of community leaders, what's up, Danny? Danny, I hope I will see in at Render in May.
So Danny, I had why am I out of
It
focus?
just as soon as you start
Uh,
talking and looked at the camera, it
it's like,
did.
and
Yeah.
we're done with you. Danny, I had major FOMO. I saw you had a like in-person event in Dallas
Hmm.
with some of my friends from that conference,
Yeah.
and it looked like it was an amazing time.
Yeah. All his stuff is really good. We did one in person in Memphis a few weeks ago because Danny was in town and it
Oh,
was awesome
awesome.
too. Had a lot of people going through the local like boot camp and it was super amazing to have them
That's great.
there and asking questions and stuff. Matthias, what's up? Goose is still booting up and reading notifications. Do you want to do like a formal do you want to do a formal intro to this one?
Yeah, let's do it. We can go ahead and start because we're just kind of, you know.
Yeah, how so depending on questions or lack thereof, how we maybe should have like put some points together.
Maybe. Or maybe we should have been collecting things throughout the week, whatevs.
Yeah. Either way. We'll figure it out. We'll just talk. Um
Uh, Danny, I love that idea. And I should do that. I do have friends in Dallas. And I was gonna say, if you want to come to Nashville.
Mm-hmm. Which I still want to come and do something, hang out with Taylor and
Yeah.
you and my friend Reggie, who I've been like wanting to
Oh
introduce
yeah.
Taylor to for like months, for us to all hang out.
That
So
did come up at that conference. Zane, I
mhm.
just need you to know, I told James this earlier. I finished my coffee
Mm.
and I went and got more just so I could hold it up for you.
Cool. Goose still not ready to do a live version of the rap, but I will have it ready for us to listen to. So we can go ahead and kick it off if you're ready.
Yep.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Compressed FM, a podcast all about web development and design. In today's episode, we're going to do an open discussion Q&A thing because that's where we are, and we're looking forward to it.
Web development and design, who would have guessed? Well, we can do them both, even add a little zest. So turn up the volume, get ready for the best. Let's get it started in this episode of Compress.
What's up, everyone? My name is James Hugh Quick, and I do... I was doing my YouTube intro, and I do weekly videos about web development related topics. So
You do.
there's my YouTube intro, but also full-time technical content creator.
Hello, my name is Amy Dutton, and I am the director of design at Zeal.
Nice.
So if you messed up, I had to nail it.
You had to. Someone's got to carry the team. We just had a comment from Matthias in the chat about thinking that the intro music was added during post, which for a while it was. We started playing these live last couple of months because we uploaded the audio to StreamYard, so we can just click a button and have that play while we're doing our intros. So,
and also feel free to apply as much social pressure as needed so that James will do it live.
One day. So here is actually a goal of mine that would, I mean, literally scare the hell out of me, is to actually perform a rap, like create a developer rap and perform it at a conference. Like, what a unique thing.
Yeah.
But also, I can't even imagine how terrified I would be to do that.
Isn't there like some musician that performs with their back to the crowd like all the time? Like that's just how they perform. That's their thing.
Oh, I don't know. And I don't know if that would make me feel any better, to be honest.
It's like, then you wouldn't have to look at anybody.
Yeah.
But then you could also incorporate like a really cool spin move when we get ready to do the episode live. Yeah.
You know me and my spin moves. Super cool.
Oh man.
So we're doing open Q&A chat episode. So we'll probably refer to people in the chat that are watching the live stream for people to listen to the podcast later on. So we'll call it any questions. Like if you have questions, put them in the chat. We'll use those to discuss. But maybe just like a kicking off point. Anything fun that you're working on? This is not a loaded question because I don't know the answer. But anything in particular that you're working on that you're excited about?
You know, that's a rhetorical question when you're asking me if I have any
there's something. I
projects
just don't know what it is.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. So it's a kind of a running joke. I have maybe 100 or so projects listed in Notion of different ideas that I have. And one of the struggles for me has always been focus. You can ask James and trying to get me to focus in one particular area. But I do want to highlight this. This was really interesting to me. So we have a person on our team that has experience doing like engineer management and project management. And he introduced me to the RICE formula, which is fascinating. So
wait,
RICE,
what's it called when you have like a leg injury and it's rest, elevation, compress, and ice or something? Like isn't it the same thing for like just taking time off? Or rest, ice, compression, elevation. Anyway, there's totally different things. So continue on your much more relevant version of RICE.
So I'm looking this up to make sure I get it right. It's so this is a formula that Intercom put together to help them prioritize projects, but it's also helpful for prioritizing features. So I'm sure there's hopefully people on the podcast listeners that have heard this before, but it stands for reach, impact, confidence, and effort. And the idea is that you're going to assign different numbers to those things. And I can actually just share the link for the Intercom article that explains all of it. But you take all these things and you multiply reach times impact times confidence and divide it by effort. And And I kind of think of effort as like when you're pointing a story, what's effort that you feel like you're gonna
Yeah.
have to put into something. But then you get your rice score. And so I took a lot of the projects that I'm the most interested in right now and applied this formula to them. And then the cool thing is with Notion, you can easily use metadata properties to set this stuff up. But then it prioritized all my stuff for me. And it was like
Cool.
dead on for what I know I should be working on, but I might not
Mhm.
necessarily be working on.
Yep.
And thank you, Goose. So Goose in the chat said rice formula, bringing up the baby formula. That is true. I totally forgotten about baby food.
Yeah.
But the thing is that was at the top of the list that I'm going to admit I still haven't done anything with. Maybe we can talk about that, is my newsletter. It was like,
Mm.
this has the most potential for the biggest impact on what you're doing
Mm.
individually and the reach that you would have, like all the things. It checks all the boxes, and it's the thing that I keep putting off week after week. So,
I've been in a similar boat. That's actually I kind of have goals for my newsletter every year, and I haven't done anything intentional for it. But the thing, like what's most top of mind for me, and I'm not necessarily changing the subject yet, but I announced I'm doing a course on Astro, so it'll be at astrocourse.dev. The website is not published yet, although it's very close, which is really exciting. But a big part of that is building up the newsletter, and so the whole marketing funnel thing would be creating videos on Astro.
mhm.
I was even thinking like even broader, like core JavaScript
Yep.
fundamental videos, but using Astro like to do it because it's easier to do that than
Mhm.
doing a regular HTML, CSS where I get no hot reload and all these other tools that come with it. But doing that and then in every video saying like, all right, I've got a course coming up. You can sign up for the newsletter or to do one of those like free cheat sheet. That's a huge thing.
Mhm.
Like 11,000 people sign up for my VS Code cheat sheet. It's not that fancy. Like there's not that much to it. It's just like, here's all the tips and tricks that I found and extensions that you might want in VS Code.
Mhm.
4,000 of those became subscribers out of my 6,000 total subscribers. So that's one of the things I specifically need to do is do that intentional effort to drive newsletter as well, especially from a course creation.
Mhm.
The general mentality is like that's the most impactful reach or connection point that you can have with a potential
Yep.
buyer for anything that you put out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we were even talking earlier before the show about these social media platforms and Twitter. I absolutely love Twitter, but it's just kind of a dumpster fire right now.
Mhm.
And I'm not, it's like this time a year ago, I wasn't posting hardly anything on Twitter and I'd still get 100 followers a month. And now I'm
Just
like,
raking them in.
right now, Goose asked a question, which I'll circle back to about posting more online right now. I've posted more online over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, and I'm still getting like a fraction of the numbers that I was getting when I was doing absolutely nothing a year ago.
Yep.
And some of it is just the algorithm changes. Did I say algorithm? I said it wrong. I even thought about it. The algorithm
When you think
changes.
about it, I feel like is
It's
when you
the worst.
overthink it, and then
Yes.
yeah.
So anybody listening, this is a running joke. I always thought logarithm was like potato, and we were recording an episode, and James is like, those
This is like
things are
a year and a
different.
half ago.
I
Yeah.
know, it's like when we first started.
Mhm.
So now I either avoid the word, or in this case, I know which one is correct. I just overthink it. So,
Yeah.
but anyways, if it's your newsletter, this is the point I'm trying to make. If it's your newsletter, you don't have to worry about somebody else controlling that formula. You have access to your community and you can reach out to them. So, anyways, that's the thing. What I'm curious about, and maybe it would be fun to take a quick poll in the chat, is like, what are the most interesting newsletters or the things that you find the most valuable? Because the thing I struggle with is like, if I'm just saying, "Oh, hey, I wrote this tweet this week," or "I did this YouTube video," I feel like that's so arrogant for it just to be about me. Like, I wanna make sure that I'm providing value. And James, one of the things I love about your newsletter is that you include things that people in the community have written.
Mm.
So there's a community aspect there, not in just the sense that you're interacting with your community outwards, but it's also like coming into you, like, and you're able to share the stuff that you're finding and things like that. Goose
Oh, yeah.
put in the chat logarithm.
The rhythm of the log.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
we had a very lengthy discussion in Discord this morning about the state of Twitter. And I don't want this to be like the whole focus of this, but like there was months ago when we were in London actually for modern front ends, and it was the people starting to migrate over to Mastodon and people not believing in the future of Twitter. And in my mind, I was like, there's no way that like Twitter actually goes away. Just like it's there's so many people, it's so established. Like a lot of us have invested so much time into Twitter. It's huge. It's hard for that to go. It's impossible for that to go away in my head. And then the stuff that they've been doing and the responses that Elon has had is incredibly beyond anything I ever imagined in a negative way. And there's like people can go and look at other details. We had a lengthy discussion again about this earlier, so it's kind of exhausted in my mind at this point. But I'm like actually fearful of the future of the benefit of a platform like Twitter. And so part of the question that you maybe didn't answer, which I'd love to hear your perspective, is not only about you posting in general, but also posting more on LinkedIn. So are you looking at LinkedIn as like, I should maybe start spending more time there in case the benefit of Twitter continues to diminish for you personally?
Yeah. So I've been, okay, this is the thing that got me thinking about LinkedIn. We were at Magnolia JS in September, and
We've been to a lot of conferences together at this point,
it's
or
been
at least
so much
several.
fun.
Yeah.
It's been so much fun. And I met one of your good friends who's now become one of my friends, Taylor Dussin. And
Shout out to
he
Taylor. Giving
is
his first keynote this summer in
he's so
Wisconsin.
good. He's
Yeah.
he's so good on stage.
Yeah.
So anybody should go to that conference. It's called that conference. But he is a recruiter here in Nashville, and he was saying that LinkedIn is the only platform that like a company can pay money or a recruiter can pay money to be able to get the information that they need for recruiting and various things like that. And it was the first time that I've heard something like that was like, oh my, they have a business plan. It's not just like advertising. It's not just I'm, trying to push out things like that. It's like, oh goodness, there's like a legitimate reason why you would pay money and things like a service that you could get out of LinkedIn. So that's the first time that I thought, oh, I need to fix this. I need to start putting stuff out there. And at that point, my profile was just embarrassing. And so I've started to try and clean it up. It's not great right now. We were talking about this briefly. I'm participating in a program called Ship 30 for 30, and I can include a link for that. But they encourage you to write an atomic essay of 200 to 300 words and drop it every day. And so right now, it's using a platform called TypeShare, where you can write that out and it'll take a screenshot or generate an image that you can then include on Twitter, because you can't have 200 to 300 word essays unless you're trying to do something in a thread. But that also gets cross-posted to LinkedIn. So right now, all the content that I'm writing on LinkedIn, that's why it was kind of the motivation behind that, was to create a writing discipline and do that every day. But I honestly, beyond that, I don't have much of a strategy. And I'm just trying to look at this, at least the next 30 days, as it's all an experiment. We never really know. And the algorithm does change. So we have to be willing to experiment. And as those changes happen, trying to figure out what our next step should be.
Yeah, we were just, Amy and I talked about this, and then also talked about this in our Discord earlier, was the idea of inside of the Learn, Build, Teach Discord of having kind of a content creator bootcamp type thing for accountability and for knowledge sharing. And so the idea now, and I'm looking for who is interested. So if you are and you're in the Discord, send me a DM. But creating a small group of 5 to 10 people and having accountability. We'll post like a status update every day, like a stand up, and then do a video / voice version of that once a week, and just use that to share goals, to share how we did with them, to share knowledge, to do all these things specifically relevant to content creation, because we have a lot of amazing content creators in there. So I'm really excited to see like what are the learnings that people have, and what is the knowledge that we can all take in just from being a part of those conversations. And from a technical perspective, maybe adding some bot features to this, like maybe having a daily ping to remind people to do their like stand up, and like a format for that, or like create a thread for each one of those. So create a new thread each day for like, here's the stand up for this day. And I've already done automated messages in the Discord bot. So it'd be like pretty quick and easy to do, which is exciting. But I'm excited to see how that turns out. And Brian Morrison really emphasized the point, which I completely agree with, of kind of keeping it small, at least to start, and keeping it really intentional. Because the problem, and I've seen this a lot with like asking people, hey, can you give me feedback on this thing? Like super broad ask, or hey, would you like to be involved in this thing? A super broad ask there as well, is like people are like, oh yeah. And then it gets down to like, okay, I have no specific reason to be here or specific thing to look at for feedback. So I just kind of bail out. So I love the idea of having like we're gonna be small, we're gonna be intentional, and we're gonna maintain it to be engaged. And then like assuming that goes well, we'll try to grow that to support, all the other content creators that we can in the community as well.
Yeah. So Matthias posted that the 30 for 30 idea is really good. I've been reading Dickie Bush's content and is really good advice and content for any writer that's out there. I think I even picked his newsletter a while back, but I'll include a link to that. Even if you don't do Ship 30, check out their newsletter. They have one of the most valuable newsletters, going back to newsletter content, one of the most valuable newsletters I think I've ever read. And they will even tell you that all of the content that you would get in the course, they offer for free, basically. It's out there. You can get it. The only thing the course really gives you is it's aggregated and you have the community. So I would say for anybody listening to jump on board with James's offer within the Learn, Build, Teach Discord community, because that's, I think, really what makes that program work is that you have that accountability and you have people that are supporting and encouraging you.
Yep. Absolutely. 100%. Maybe like a technical thing to kind of turn to or change the conversation a little bit is I've been working on that JQQ meme generator, like a complete new version of that, which has been really fun. And so the general tech stack for people that are curious is it's a Next.js application. It uses Cloudinary for images, and I'll talk about how I've tweaked that in a second. It uses AppWrite for authentication and then being able to save images that people create, and Tailwind for styling. And it's been going really well. And so I ended up I did a video on this that will go out next week about how I created a use user hook / using the context API in React that integrates with AppWrite. And I actually use ChatGPT to generate that for me. So I like started by saying like, hey, can you create a hook that has the state of a user, a loading variable, and a couple of functions, like stub out a few functions for login, log out, sign up. And it did that for me. And I was like, okay, now can you like incorporate AppWrite SDK in this? And it did everything almost down to the like every line of code was almost perfect. There was a few things I like spot checked and tweaked, but it generated all that code for me. So have auth working in there, had ChatGPT help me with that. And I'll have that video coming out next week, which has been like super fun to work with. And then one big performance thing is, so Cloudinary works by like you can pass in the URL for an image, you can pass overlays with text, you can pass image overlays. We talked about how we use this for the podcast as well. So you could do all these things inside of the URL, but and in the application, what would happen is there's a text input, and I would just take that text and then add it to the URL and generate a new image. And the performance of that was questionable at first because like every new letter that someone typed, it was basically going and trying to fetch a new version of that image, which is a lot. And so instead of that, I'd added like some debouncing logic to basically say like, as someone is typing, don't regenerate the image. Wait until they finish typing and then add a little bit of delay after that just to make sure. So if they finish a character typing and then they wait for a second, or maybe it's like 2 seconds, then it's going to go and generate the image because we can assume that they're done actually typing what they're doing. And I took that one step further recently and changed this just to do like we talked about fancy versions of this with SVGs and using Canvas to overlay text. But I just did like a regular text element in HTML. And so people can basically like build the meme. It's super fast because it's just changing a text element, not doing anything fancy. And then as they save that, it saves the details about it, like the top text and the bottom text and the font sizes for those. And then we use Cloudinary later to render those and to share them, which I think is pretty cool. So super quick and easy to create the meme to get the feedback on what it looks like. And then later on have the power of Cloudinary to actually like display and share the images, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I've had fun with that. I've also been working a ton on the landing page for the Astro course.
What's
page.
been your biggest learning there?
Things just take a long time. Like it's tough, which I mean makes sense. I think we all kind of go through that. I'm really excited about what I have. I think copy is like always one of the hardest things, like just getting getting impactful words on the page. And that's actually like I specifically want to get feedback on that from anyone and everyone that I can. So I'll send it to you. But the one annoying hang up that I have is I want to have on there while it's in before it's actually on sale to have people sign up for the newsletter to get updates and tips and tricks and that sort of stuff to hopefully then funnel them to buy. But Podia, you can embed a form on your site that then like submits the form to the Podia domain and redirects them that way. But I don't want to do that. I want to keep them on my domain. And the downside is there's no good way to do that. So I kind of hacked it where I end up just submitting a form or a post request using Fetch to their API, get the response back, and then me just show like, okay, thanks for subscribing. And so all that works locally, but when I deploy that to Netlify, I can't for the life of me figure out what goes wrong, but something goes wrong, and that just doesn't work when it's actually deployed, which is incredibly frustrating.
Wonder if it's like a CORS or a permission or a token or something.
Yeah,
I'm sure
so
you've done that.
there was CORS originally because I was submitting the fetch request from the browser to Podia directly. For people, this distinction is really important because I didn't understand this for a long time. CORS is not actually a server restriction. CORS is a browser restriction that the server must supply a header for the browser to allow you to make a cross-origin request. So Podia backend does not supply that header, which means Chrome and other browsers then prevent that cross-origin request from being made. So I basically just proxied that request to an API endpoint in Astro. So just send the request to my backend, which then sends the request to Podia. Again, all that works locally, foregoing the CORS issue. But then when I deployed it to Netlify, for the life of me, can't figure out why it's not working. So that's my big holdup right now.
ChatGPT didn't know.
I haven't asked. I probably should.
Ask.
ChatGPT for the win for anything. Yeah.
I've been doing a side project with Next 13 and using their app folder.
Nice.
And that has had some really interesting learnings that was not expecting. So I know that React server components are a huge benefit of using the app folder and that it's very snappy, all the things. But it gets so frustrating sometimes trying to pass things back and forth from server components to client-side components. Because on a server component, you can't have state. And you just forget when you're working with React. I was just like, oh, I'll just throw some state in there to be able to do it. Well, you can't just throw state in there. Then it has to become a client component. And so trying to be mindful of when you're doing that. The other thing that I learned is that, so I'm grabbing data on the server side and then trying to pass that down to a client component. And you can't just pass, in some cases, I guess you could, but in my case, I couldn't just pass the information I was getting from the database straight over to that client component because it wants that data to be serialized and it also wants a plain object. So this is also new to me. A plain object in JavaScript means that you can't have like getters and setters and like a lot of the things like functions and nested objects that you would normally think of when you're working with objects. Has to be like a single layered object that's just pure data. So the easiest workaround, and we can shout out our friend Brad Garapy. So anybody playing our bingo game at home, we got Brad in for this episode. But he suggested, and this worked, it was stringifying, doing JSON.stringify to convert that over to a string and then parse it. Yeah.
It's
a little bit of a painful learning.
Yeah. That's been a hack for a long time, especially for people making copies of objects. So if people know the difference of pass by value versus pass by reference, which is more prominent in other language or more, I don't know, it's similar concepts, but I feel like taught more officially in other languages than JavaScript. But the same thing applies for primitives versus objects. And so for people making copies of them, it actually gets really difficult. You could use the spread operator, but the spread operator only goes one level deep into properties. So if you have a nested object inside of an object, spread operator doesn't actually make a true deep clone of an object. And so a hack has always been to just convert that object to a string and then parse it back and you get your copy. There's a few limitations and I forget what exactly there are, but there's a few things where that doesn't work. But now, and Matthias is referencing this in the chat, there is structured clone, which is, I phrased this incorrectly in my video, I think when I shared this, It's not built into JavaScript. It's built into the browser APIs and then in Node.js APIs. I think is the correct way to explain that, because it's not built into JavaScript itself. It's just supported by the spec for the browser APIs and then on Node.js as well.
Cool.
Fun facts.
That's
So
super
what
fun facts.
structured clone is super handy. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a link in Twitch for anybody that's interested in that. Neil, thanks for chiming on YouTube. That's our first comment on YouTube. I'm actually shocked. Like we haven't really had people comment on YouTube. If you're listening to us on YouTube, please let us know, leave a comment. And if you have questions for anything you want to hear us talk about, let us know. Remind me, what's the project? Did you even say like what the project is that you're working on with Next.js 13? Cool. So do that piece.
Talk about that.
Yeah.
So that was a project for Zeta, and it was called Made
cool.
with Zeta. And the idea is that it's a gallery where they would be able to keep track of any projects that were made with Zeta.
Yep.
And so their current site is on Next. So I built it on Next 13 so it would complement their existing structure. And it's using Zeta as the backend. So that was also part of that project, was learning how Zeta works. And there's some really cool stuff within Zeta. If you haven't looked at it yet, James, I know you've also created some content for them, but I think that most, are you wearing their swag? Oh, nice. That's lovely.
Yep.
I don't have one of those. Just wearing the compressed one. But the thing that I really like about Zeta is that they really focus on the developer experience. And so there's tons of ways that you can interact with their content and be able to write your schemas and things like that. So they have a VS Code extension. So you can create your schemas through their extension. You can also view the content directly within VS Code, or you can go to their website and use their GUI interface to create all that information, or you can use the command line. And then once you have it created, you can also run, I think it's like Zeta init or something like that, but it will create a schema file within your project that has all of that data, so that then when you're referencing it, you have all that IntelliSense and type safety and all that wonderful stuff.
Did a video on that feature because I like databases. You're now starting to see, I think, innovation in databases. Like I was at a company that was, I think, a big part of that at Planet Scale of doing modern things. Zeta is one of those, and now kind of across the boards. It's funny, I get sponsorship requests most popularly from two different types of things: headless CMSs and databases. And so I'm seeing like how many different options there are across the board for these. But you're seeing a lot of innovation in databases, because for a long time it was like, hey, we're doing all these cool things for developer tools, and databases are still just databases.
Yeah.
But now you're starting to see a lot of evolution in databases, and Zeta, for a lot of different reasons, is doing that. And one of the things I called out in a recent video was specifically like, I love the idea of getting up-to-date generated types associated with your models in your database. Because otherwise, if you're just writing those from hand, like you're having to manually update them anytime you like want to add a property or whatever. So I love their code gen is the actual command that you run to generate those types. And it's so useful because now you have a client that's already configured for you that you can reference, and then you have your database types.
The other thing that's really nice about it, while we're just, talking about how great Zeta is, they have a text generator feature. So you don't have to seed your database. It will go in and just add random strings to everything, which makes it really easy when you're trying to look at
How do you trigger
something.
that?
If you go to their, so if you log in and look at it online and you're looking at your table, there's a button in the bottom right that says generate schema, or not generate schema. Sorry. It's like generate data.
Dummy data. Really?
Yeah. And
that's cool.
Stick a bunch of stuff. Now, one thing that I was clicking it, generate random data is what the button says. One thing that I realized, I'm going to pass this along to them, is if you have a filter set up and you click generate data, it might not show your data. So there was one time where I was like clicking the button. I was like, oh, it's not working. And then I cleared my filter and it was like, there's, hundreds of entries.
That's cool.
So,
I hadn't caught that feature. That would be
it's a great feature.
Yeah. That's a great, like, short at least. I don't know if I'll do like a dedicated video, but at least a short. That's super handy.
Yeah, and
They've got so many things.
right.
Ray has been doing stuff with
that's what I was gonna
search,
say. That's
which
exactly what
is
I was gonna say.
really good. Like I've really enjoyed her explanations of search. And it's funny, like I talked to the team at Zeta and they sent me a couple of like blog articles that kind of made sense. And then Ray did like her video recently. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like it all kind of came together about how the different forms of search work with Zeta.
I just included a link in the chat for Ray's YouTube channel, but I'll also find the specific video that you're talking about. I think that may be on Zeta's channel.
Oh, it was on their channel. That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, so I'm glad this turned into the Zeta Love podcast episode, which is well deserved.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm in my Astro course, by the way. I'm going out on a limb, and in the premium package, like we're gonna build a few different projects. One of them is a blog, and in the premium version of the blog, we're gonna add comments. And so adding comments now gets really complicated because I didn't just want to add comments where like just type in your username in the comment because that's not super safe. So we're actually going to go the whole route of doing authentication with Astro and Zeta, like storing user stuff in Zeta and like basic encrypting passwords and that sort of stuff.
That's
Like we won't do fully functioning like password resets,
AWT,
and all these things.
Do all that?
We will. Yes. So we will have a JWT that gets set as a cookie and pass that back and forth. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
That's like one of those things that I don't think a lot of people know or understand. They just defer to other services that provide that.
Yep. And I'm all about deferring to other services as well, but I also think it's one of those things that's worth going through and getting experience with once, even if you don't build it yourself. I think understanding the basics of how that stuff works is super, super helpful. So I feel like in a course about Astro where you think you're just like looking at markdown and static content, I feel like it's a really nice addition in depth.
Well, here's one of the things I like a lot about some of the new services and technologies that are coming out is you have like Remix and even SvelteKit and Astro that they're all starting to like swing the other way and lean more on the browser APIs and the built-in functionality that you already have, which it's like, why reinvent the wheel? Why try and create all these abstractions when you get that by default with the browser? And so if you can like even lean into that even more so with the course and teaching those browser things, those carry on beyond just Astro.
Yep, absolutely. And the flip side to that is like people doing their own abstraction layers. Ideally, that's for like developer experience, just being easier so that you don't have to know that stuff. But at the end of the day, like knowing how the stuff works underneath the hood is almost always a valuable thing. Roga in the chat is saying, curious if James or viewers know of an AI tool that directly returns JSON or other form of structured data based on a schema I provide. I'm using OpenAI API right now, but I have to parse out the JSON and half the time it gets cut off because of length and fails. Anyone have any ideas? So I think the overall takeaway is the challenge of asking ChatGPT for data in JSON format and then it either not giving it in the right format or it doesn't give the whole thing before it kind of like fails. And I've had that before where I ask it a question, it generates content, and then it just kind of stops midway through. I think you can run the continue command. Like if you just type continue, it will continue where it was. I've had mixed results with that actually working. Like sometimes one time I said continue and it was like, I'm already done. What do you mean? And I'm like, no, you're not done. Please continue. But I think that's the way, but it is unfortunate. I don't really know what the specific reasoning is that it just kind of stops midstream.
I was gonna say, is that the GUI or is that like when you're working with the API?
I'm talking about the GUI. Maybe Roga saying Ryan saying I'm using the API right now, but I have to parse the JSON.
I can't remember what it was exactly, but Sanjay on my team was working with some stuff with the OpenAI API with Webflow. And so what he was doing was he was triggering the Webflow API, downloading our blog post, using OpenAI
Doing
to
cool stuff,
generate a
yeah.
description and then post that back to Webflow. And so I think I remember him talking about some of that stuff. To be honest, I don't remember what the answer is. I can ask him and follow back up with you, but I will include a link to his repo that you can check out and see if that has the answer in it.
This reminds me something that I didn't talk about with the JQQ memes thing. I haven't released this yet, but I did add an integration where on the meme generator page, you can cycle through random images of myself. And so I added a AI generate caption with AI. And what I did, so here's the challenge. You could in theory, what I would do is send OpenAI an image and say, hey, generate meme text for this relevant to JavaScript, imposter syndrome, blah, 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 like these topics, but they can't receive images. So what I did is I gave alt text manually, which I could have generated this using something else, but I only had 40 or so images. So I generated alt text in Cloudinary for each one of those images. And so what I do is I have the ID of the image that the user is trying to generate text for. I send this to a backend endpoint. I use the ID to go and look up all the details about that image in Cloudinary, which includes that alt text. So it's like guy with his hands up with a shocked face. and then call the API, the OpenAI API, to say like, hey, can you generate meme text with 2 pieces of text, top and bottom, that have a max of this many characters that are relevant to these topics, JavaScript, imposter syndrome, blah, 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 for an image that looks like this, like whatever the alt text is. And it actually works really well. Like I was pretty proud of it. So I need to figure out, like, do I need to charge for that? Because eventually I'll hit AI limits if a bunch of people use it. But I also thought about abstracting that a little bit and just making a dev memes generator website. And I don't know where I would source images from and how I would get the like description of the image. But in theory, I could do an automated alt text for the image and send that to ChatGPT, OpenAI API, and be able to generate meme text. I thought it'd be cool.
Yeah, that's cool. That is very cool. Have you messed around with Midjourney at all?
No, I haven't. And I want to. The process, do you know how to create something with Midjourney? Because you have to go to Discord.
Yeah, it's very clunky. For a user experience designer, it's the worst. Because what you have to do, and it took me a while to figure it out, is you have to sign up for an account and then through their Discord bot, go to a specific channel on their server and put your prompt. And you're basically just interacting with that bot. Now, what I will say
it's like
is
super crowded, right?
Like, yeah.
Like
and at different times of the day, it's faster or slower depending on how many people are in there. But I will say from a community perspective, it's really cool to be like, oh man, that's a beautiful image that this person created. But we are working on a few projects at work where we generated all of the art for the website using Midjourney, and it is beautiful.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So it's stuff like that. I'm like, okay, Sarah Drasner said this a few months ago where she was like, I'm all for the productivity gains that OpenAI and ChatGPT give us. And I do believe that our jobs are still going to be important. They're just going to be augmented version of what they are now. And it's important that we continue to change. She was just saying, like, the only thing is I love my job now. And I just want to make sure that the augmented version of this is something that I still like. And I totally resonate with that because I look at these beautiful illustrations that Midjourney created. I'm like, I would have loved to spend the time to create these illustrations myself or do something, within Procreate on my iPad and all that. Nobody's got time for that. And so Midjourney created something beautiful and I love using it, but it is an augmented version of what my job
your job
would have been normally.
Absolutely.
So, but anyways,
we've talked about that too in the past of like not replacing jobs, augmenting how we do jobs. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, but back to what you're saying, you put in a prompt on Discord and then it'll show you 4 different versions and then it gives you 2 rows of buttons below that. And so what you do is you click the buttons that are associated with the images above and you click whether you want a variation of that or you want a high-res version of that. And one thing that I did not realize that I found out through this project at work is that you can use the envelope emoji on the result that it gives you, and it will give you metadata about that particular image, like if you've gotten the high res version. And so that's important because what it will give you is the seed number that they use to help generate that particular image. So it's all randomized. They have a seed number that they use as part of the random generation. So at the website, one of the things I was running into was like, okay, this is great. It's generating all these beautiful illustrations, but I need them to look consistent. Like they should all belong together. And so what you do when you provide your prompt is you can also use a flag, just like you would in your terminal, to say the seed is this number. And then all of a sudden it looks like the same illustrator could have provided all of those images. But
Someone,
go ahead.
Someone, Cynthia in the chat just mentioned that you can pay $10 a month and add Midjourney, I think, to your own Discord. So does that mean if I pay the $10 a month, I could add it to my Discord? Anyone in there could use it?
I'm not sure how that works. I do know I've paid $10 just because apparently there's a rights issue where it's like if you just go in for free, it's like who owns that artwork? Does Midjourney own it or do you own it? So I've paid $10 to use it. It also gives me more credits to be able to generate images. But
Cynthia is now saying only people who pay $10 can use it.
You can get free. You can get like 20 question prompts for free or something like that, because I have somebody else on my team that was just experimenting. Yeah. Firefly is really interesting. That's an app that Adobe put out. And to me, the reason that's interesting is that the user interface is like through a website. So it's a little bit more intuitive. And it will also do things like if you're working with illustrations where you can create editable paths that you can then go in and modify. So it feels like with that, there's a little bit more flexibility that might be more helpful.
Gooseman is in the chat, who I found out recently is the Microsoft MVP, has talked a lot about some of the tools that Microsoft and Bing has for images. And I forget, maybe he can add context in the chat too. Like there's some benefits of the Bing tools that are built on top of Dolly, I believe it's like Microsoft's wraparound Dolly. I'm not 100% sure about that. And I think they like kind of make that a little easier to work with or have a higher tier or something. So I'd be curious for him to add some context about that. There's also a comment that I wanted to call out, and we can come back to the AI piece from Daryl. Daryl said, I'm a sad panda. I work with Salesforce and web components. Basically, when all you guys, us, mention these awesome frameworks, I feel, I'm assuming, kind of like FOMO and all that kind of stuff. So a couple of things here is, as content creators, Amy and I we have the flexibility to go and experiment with things much more so than most people at traditional companies, especially bigger companies, especially bigger projects, especially bigger teams, because it just doesn't make sense for them to change technologies all the time. So the stuff that you see on social media is absolutely going to be skewed like to the modern, because that's the stuff, that's the benefit that we have as content creators, is taking the time to do that sort of stuff because we're excited about it. It's not the reality across the board. The other aspect of this is like, if you're at a role with stuff that you don't enjoy, maybe that's an opportunity to go and do research into roles at companies, different companies, or within the same company for stuff that you might enjoy more. So don't think just because you don't do it now that it can't be an option for you down the road.
Yeah. I've heard Brad talk about technology stuff at Atlassian because it is a bigger enterprise company. And it was actually a fascinating conversation with him explaining how they go through the process of upgrading. Daryl, I would love to hear about Salesforce if you could talk about it. But he was saying that he even had the opportunity to pitch for the architect on his team to incorporate new technology. So, and they approved his request. So it might also be an opportunity for you to pitch something. Or the other thing that I thought about is, I don't know if you've looked at the mitosis project, but we had Sammy Jabber on the episode or the podcast a few months ago, and he was talking about how you can write a React component and have it generate web components. You can Svelte, Vue, Angular, everything by just writing a React component. So I wonder if you're like, I want to use Svelte, but we're writing web components. If you could use something to augment it into the form that you need it to be.
Yeah, it's a great call out. Rolex on YouTube is asking, what method do you use or more often use and efficient for responsive web pages? There's like a million different ways you could potentially take this. One thing that comes to mind is you often hear about like mobile first design, where you build for mobile first and then scale up. I don't know if this is the right way to do it or I do it for any benefit. I always start with desktop and then scale down. I think it's just because we're more used to building kind of for the desktop and less for mobile. So that's what I just kind of start with. That's my general take. I use Tailwind CSS for most of the stuff that I do. I love that they have, utility classes to do things like Flexbox and Grid and responsive design kind of baked into the Tailwind framework. So that I think is really helpful. And I'll give a shout out really quickly to Polypane, and I'm still getting shit about this on the YouTube video that I
Are you
published to
really?
highlight them. Yeah, and it frustrates me to no end. It's like I made the mistake in the video to say like a friend of mine created this product and it's really cool. And so dorks in the comments are like, of course you're going to support it. It's your friend. I'm like, I literally met this dude on stream. He's awesome, but I met this guy on stream and was blown away from how awesome the product was. And I just wanted to highlight it for people to get exposed to see it. If it's not for you, great, move on. But there's like it's driving me nuts. But anyway, Polypane is really cool because you can have in the same like browser window multiple versions of your site running side by side, and they're in sync based on scroll. So like if you have a desktop version and a mobile version side by side, you can see both of them, and then scrolling on one automatically syncs the scroll on another. It also has tons of other built-in tools. Go and watch the video if you're interested. Fun fact, it's a paid product. Know that up front. I don't want to hear any more shit from people in the comments about it. Because if it's not for you, great. Cynthia supports Polypane. Yes, thank you so much. Because if you would have said anything contrary to that, I would have been really annoyed. But Polypane's awesome, and it has lots of tools built in for accessibility and responsive design and a lot of different things. But I shouldn't have talked this long and defer because this is much more up your wheelhouse. So any like tips and tricks, things that you do for building responsive web pages?
Yeah. So Sissy is another alternative. That's SIZZY. I'm not friends with the creator.
So your opinion's actually valid then.
Oh man. But I would basically double down on everything that you said. The other thing that I would encourage you is if you're having to write CSS media queries, to make sure that all your media queries match. And what I mean by that is if you go in and you say, I'm going to say my breakpoints are 640, 768, 1024, 1200, you do min width on all of those. Make sure that it's all min width. Or if you're going to say do max width, do all max width. It becomes very problematic if you start doing min width 640, max width 1024. It's just a world of pain. So, whether you start with desktop or mobile, doesn't really matter as much, I don't think, but whether you do min widths or max widths is a big difference.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's all about consistency. Personally, I prefer min width, and that's what you would consider, say, mobile first, because what that means is the default is going to be what appears on mobile, but that's with the min width piece.
Yep. Cool. Another thing for consistency like that is not something I do myself, but it's something to think about. Is like you think about, you can have margins in between things stacked vertically. And so a lot of people, I think, do the recommendation of like, don't mix margin top, margin bottom. Choose, I'm going to use margin bottom consistently through here, or margin top, like choose one of those and stay consistent. So you have a better idea of like, if I'm looking at the margin between these two things, I know I need to look at the one on top or the one on bottom based on the way we do our margins.
Yep. And margin is weird too, because you can have margin collapse where it's like,
I just
I'm
had a
putting a
collapse issue
margin.
the other
It's so
day.
frustrating. It's like I'm putting margin there. I'm not seeing anything. What is happening? It's like it's not respecting that. But one of the ways that I found around it is exactly what you're talking. I always do margin bottom. And then I know when I'm trying to troubleshoot, it's always being applied to the bottom.
Yep. Yeah. Tell me really quickly about Sizzy. Tell me about that one. And is it paid or free, just out of curiosity?
It is paid. It's paid. The last time I looked, I think it was $8 a month, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's gone up. It's been a few years. I've turned it on and off. It's like if I'm doing a bunch of responsive work, then I might buy it. But I'm pretty sure it does all the same stuff that Polypane does in terms of I'm going to load this up in several different devices. And when I'm scrolling around, everything is in sync so that I can see what that looks like across the board. Cool. So I would just say, to me, they're comparable. I'm assuming there might be other features that Polypane has, because you said, it has so many great developer tools and functionality and things like that. But
I would venture to guess. Yeah, I would venture to guess that Polypane does have a lot of like neat little tools in addition to Sizzy. And that's like, again, going back to the haters, it's like it pissed me off so much because it like I have never in my life had so much negativity on a video when I'm specifically just trying to call out something that I think is beneficial for the community. And people that like actually try it, whether or not they think it's worth paying for, love it. And other people like I don't think even gave it a chance. But a lot of people would comment like they would say like, why would I pay for this when I could get these features elsewhere for free? And they also made a point about like it's just something built on top of open source that's now charging money. One, tons of things are built on open source that make money. Like all the things that people are building with AI that are now generating money are built on top of not necessarily open source stuff, but like just an API. Like they're just building a product on top of something that already exists. So let's not pretend that that's actually a problem, because it's not, and it's every day that it happens. But then they're also talking about feature set of like, I could get this thing somewhere else. And a lot of them have focused in on like one specific feature. Like I could get automatic scrolling and different things in this other free tool. I'm like, okay, that like fantastic.
Use
If
that.
you can
Good
do
for
that,
you.
look at this and just consider whether this set of features makes sense for you. Again, if it still doesn't, great. If it's not worth paying for, great. But it doesn't need to become a shot at this guy who like is building a product and trying to make money, which is the epitome of like the amazing thing about being a developer is we have the skills to build shit that people pay for, or just do it for fun, or both. But like, let's not use it as a negative. Like, oh, they're so frustrating. I'm glad that I'm getting this chance to rant about this, because I almost made a dedicated video on this titled like "Developers Piss Me Off" or something like. Because I feel like part of, as a content creator, people question the negativity, and I've never really struggled with this because most of the time the negativity has been so outweighed by the positivity that it's never been a question for me of like, how do I handle the negativity? It's easy to brush off. For this one particular video, just getting comment after comment of saying the same stupid shit frustrated me enough that I have never been frustrated like this before. Obviously, I think you can tell, Jess can tell, because we've talked about this a lot. And so as you grow an audience bigger and bigger, more of that stuff is going to happen, right? And so I'm having to like really reflect on like, how do I handle this, and how do I mentally handle it? How do I outwardly handle it? And I think part of what I was getting to mentally with myself is I need to lean into this and like make a public thing for myself of being like, y'all are the reason that some of this shit sucks sometimes is because we use platforms as a way for negativity instead of just like supporting people that are building stuff. And so maybe I'll still do a video about that. I haven't quite decided on that, but that's like kind of more of my natural personality that I've always talked about wanting to include more in the content that I create.
Yep, for sure. I'll see what I can do to get Taylor Swift on that video with you.
Taylor Swift on the video? Is that
haters gonna hate?
Haters, yeah.
Yeah, she can do a little dance in the back.
I say this all the time when one of us is frustrated, or when dogs get like a shiver and they like shake. I say it all the time. Shake it off, Taylor. Also, before I miss this, on YouTube, got I don't even know what this is called because I'm very
super chat. A
super chat. Thank you from Janata. Maybe if you have a better pronunciation, please let me know. But thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And your money, not that we wouldn't have answered your question, but obviously is much more visible now. So the question is, how does your framework decision process work before starting a project?
When it's green.
Yeah, that's actually fancy. Cool. It does it inside of here as well. So the decision is just like choose felt and run with it, right? Like that's what it is. If we had
I was gonna say Scion's not in here. Usually he's pumping Svelte. So
what are your thoughts on choosing a framework? Like how do you choose a framework before starting a project?
I think a huge part of it goes down to what project it is. So like when you're talking about Svelte, it's so easy for me to be like, oh yeah, SvelteKit. I love SvelteKit. But I have also felt the pains of SvelteKit because they have, like when they were going to 1.0, they had tons of breaking changes every single week. And I mean, even right now, I'm experiencing a situation where we have some upgraded tools and it's no longer working with SvelteKit. It's painful because it's such a young framework. So even though the developer experience is fantastic, it's like, okay, if this is a side project that I'm working on, that's one thing. But if this is an enterprise project where people are depending on it for their livelihood, that's an entirely different conversation. The other thing is just trying to think through, okay, where is this project going to be in 2 years? 1 year? I know technology moves fast, but is it going to have the support? How is the community
Yeah.
supporting it? How are the maintainers supporting it? So, a framework that we refer to a lot at work is Redwood, and the way that they go through about with their community and walking them through upgrades is absolutely fantastic. I attended one of their town halls the other week where David, one of the co-founders, got on a stream and he starts explaining these are all the changes that were made. And he talks about what are breaking changes. And if you go back, he's done a fantastic job of maintaining that documentation. So, but again, it's still Redwood's a little bit different because it's pulling in a bunch of technologies that people already use, but that could be a huge plus for leaning on that. And it leans itself really well to working with other developers. They've tried to put a lot of best practices in place.
Mm-hmm.
But if you, I'll just list a few more and then I'll let Jane sneak a word or two in. But like if you look at Remix, they just got bought out by Shopify. So it's like, okay, well, I know they're not going to go anywhere soon. So
Yep.
knowing that how they're funded is also plays into things. You could also look at Next, and in the JavaScript ecosystem, they have the shareholder piece of that. They probably have the most users. And so that's something else to keep in mind. What is the community doing? Or is there a lot of support? If I run into an issue, can I Google this? People don't Google anymore. But if I Google this, is the result going to come up in, Stack Overflow? Or is it, documented well enough that ChatGPT is going to give me the answer I need? I've had issues where ChatGPT will give me the wrong answer for SvelteKit because it's changed recently.
Yeah,
Same kind
that's
of
true.
concept is like keeping those things in mind when you're picking is, what's the project for? Do I need the community? How's the documentation? Can I find the answers that I'm looking for?
GPT this is the new Google this is
that's
the
what it
comment in
is.
the chat, which is perfect.
GPT this. Okay.
Yeah. Talked about this earlier. Like as content creators, we spend more time with latest and greatest. And so doing demos for YouTube videos gives me an excuse to try things out, which is really exciting. And it is a lot of fun. There's only so much you do that, especially with things that you want to take for bigger projects. So there's the idea of I want to build a project to learn about a new framework. That's a great learning opportunity. That's something that is super fun. That's when I would choose something more newer, less supported, like more experimental, etc. Then there's to factor in like all of what Amy said of like I'm actually building a product that I want to take seriously. I want to know I have support available, whether it's in Discord or Stack Overflow or something. So you look at like how long have they been around? What's the team like? What's the funding like? All those things, which totally makes sense. I think a lot of this comes down to experience on your team too. Like if you're working with a team, you're probably going to make a decision like heavily influenced by the experience that people have and the opinions that people have. So an example of that is with Redwood. Redwood is very opinionated. They do a lot of stuff for you, which I'm all for. The less I have to do personally, all about it. Other developers are more opinionated themselves and they want to take care of stuff because they want to do it specifically the way they want to. And so I think that's a team decision personality thing to consider. And something maybe this is like a stupid statement, but like maybe just using React and not Next.js makes more sense if you're super opinionated, but that seems silly because I would never recommend people start with just React and not Next.js, even if you don't use Next.js for all it's worth. But we talked about this in the past. Like if I was building something that I thought would be like a startup idea, I may even go like a full Node Express route, like have a full dedicated backend and not the serverless functions and API routes built into Next.js. Even though I love Next.js, maybe I would separate those things out. And I would probably use that in place of SvelteKit. Although I think I'm really comfortable with SvelteKit as well. So I think I would build a startup on SvelteKit. But there's lots of different choices. It comes down obviously to personal preferences, types of things you're building. For example, with Astro, like if I'm building a really highly interactive web application and less of a static site type thing or a content site, probably not going to use Astro. Not that you can't do almost all those things with Astro because they have support for API functions or API endpoints, and that's actually really cool. But I would probably go for a framework that's more built for that specific sort of thing. So it's not to say that like frameworks can't do most of the things. It's just other ones may be more optimized for that.
We had Alan Shreve on the podcast a few weeks ago. I don't think his episode has dropped in audio form, obviously by the time this one drops in audio form, it'll be available, but you can go check it out on the live stream on James's channel. But he's behind Ngrok. And one of the interesting things, or the soapboxes that he stood on, was make boring developer decisions. And that's not something that you hear often, but he was just talking about the stability of it. Yeah, if you're trying to build an entire business on it, make a boring decision.
Yep, absolutely. David Kennedy had a comment. What's up, David, by the way? Depending on the project, if I'm using the project to learn, I would possibly try a new framework. If I need to get something out quickly, for example, I choose what I'm comfortable with. Absolutely. And there's nothing, like, all this stuff evolves. Like, there's nothing to say that you couldn't move it from React to Next.js later, or from Next.js to Svelte or whatever later. You could absolutely do that. So there is conversation of like trying to make the best decision up front that you can, but you also kind of don't want to overthink it at the expense of just starting to build stuff. Like, I think building stuff is better than just not. There's another question from Janata, I think was the best guess at pronunciation that I got. Is they've been working as a front-end developer for 6 years. Awesome. Starting to create content for beginners in the area in my country, which is Brazil. Give me a tip on this too, please. We say this all the time. The tip is get started and continue to do it. Like, you'll figure out how to create stuff. You'll figure out where to create stuff. You'll figure out what your audience is. You'll figure out all these things the longer you do it. But the short answer is just continue to do it, and do it enough to where you actually learn that stuff. We just got really quickly, sorry, a raid from Dev Argual. I've never said this out loud. I know the name, Dev Argual with 27. Anyway, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Sincerely appreciate it. A little bit of context for what we're doing is this is our weekly episode of the Compressed FM podcast. We actually had someone reschedule, and we're just doing this as an open Q&A conversation one with Amy and I, which we've talked about wanting to do more of. So we're right now talking about framework decisions, and then we were talking about getting started creating content and sharing with people. And anyway, we're hanging out. If you have questions for us, I am a full-time content creator. If you haven't met me, do a lot of stuff with JavaScript and web development in general. And then my co-host, Amy Dutton, if you want to like introduce yourself for people that are new.
Yeah, I'm the director of design at Zeal. So I'm also a full stack developer, but a lot of my focus is on design and user experience.
Sweet. No short answers, long answers only. No shortcuts in life. Love it.
I can give a long answer.
So do your answer to, if you have anything you want to add for like the content creation perspective. And then we've got an amazing comment on in here that I want to read for you.
So I think a big thing is consistency. Like, that's really how I say you prove your worth. I mean, obviously you can say good things, but just having value over time. And that's really what is going to build your audience. To be honest, it's something that I've struggled with, but I think James and the community that he's been able to build up over time is a perfect testament of that. So yeah, actually, James, are you coming up on 200,000 subs on YouTube? So
it's funny. Like, I've talked about this some on the podcast, some not. YouTube stats are down like crazy compared to what they were before. Very big. Yeah. Like my two sticking points right now are stats on YouTube and the shitty comments on the one video on YouTube are the two things that stress me out on a daily basis. But Jess today was like, "Oh, when do you think you'll make it to 200,000?" And she was like, "Do you have a goal for that?" And I was like, "Well, my goal would have been like 6 months ago had things not like fallen off a cliff. But I'm at 180, and hopefully I'll be at 120 or 200.
Yeah, just
sometime soon. We'll see.
Yeah, but consistency lets your audience know that they can trust you and that they can invest time in you because they know that you'll be around if they need something. So I would just say consistency. And unfortunately, that's just something that you have to build up over time. But
absolutely,
to me, that makes the biggest difference. And it's not the thing that you can just microwave and it's done. It's every day or every week.
There's like, most of us see overnight successes, and those just really don't exist. Like, most of the things that you think are overnight success is like people have been doing this for 10 years and you're just now seeing them have success. And I actually really love this quote of mine. I forget if it was in my keynote at that conference or if it was at
I love it when you quote yourself.
Oh, I do. I've got some good ones. I think it was actually at my talk at All Things Open back in November, and it was about the impact that content creation has had on my life. And I did screenshots of like 2017, 18, 19, and it was 2017. There was like no stats. 18 was like baby stats. 19 was like showing a little bit of growth. 2020 was huge, and it's gone down a little bit since then. But in my explanation to that, my thing was like consistency, all the things that you just talked about, and my really impactful statement, which I was like really passionate about, is I was creating content when none of you cared. Like nobody in this audience gave a shit about the stuff that I was doing in 2017, but now you're here to hear me speak about the impact that content creation has had on my career. And it's just one of those things. I just don't think overnight success exists. Like it's from doing it consistently, and not only are you earning the trust and like the reputation that you're consistent, that you said, but going back to my point of like the iteration, the cycle, the how you continuously improve and get better, that's from consistency. Like you're going to continue to learn the answer to all the questions that people may want to ask about how to get better. You're going to learn that from doing it. Yeah. Overnight success, 6 years in the making.
I'm trying to find this quickly. Oh, I'm not sure it's going to come.
Really, really quick comment from Jutanium in the chat is if we have any interest in having somebody from Solid.js come on and do an episode about Solid.js. He knows a guy, wink, wink. Yes, absolutely. Dan, send me a message and we'll get you scheduled to come on and talk about that. That'd be awesome.
So I was just going to double. Oh, goodness.
Sorry. Let me just highlight this one really quick. Thank you, Daryl. Appreciate that. Where the comment says, we're just here for Amy. Don't fool yourself. Thank you. Thank you for keeping my ego in check.
That.
Yeah.
I think that'll be Jess's favorite comment.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
But to double down on what you were saying, if you look at Marcus Brownlee, like all the stuff that he's been able to do on YouTube, I'm been looking at Ali Abdal and some of the stuff he's been talking about of spending time and consistency on YouTube. And like, it's crazy. The average, just to throw a few numbers out there that they shared, is that the average, well, this is to me a good channel. If you have 1,000 to 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, the average is that you've created 152 videos. So nice. If you think about that, like you have to put in the reps, put in 152 videos to even come close to 1K to 10K subscribers. And then he provided stats all the way up to 1 million. So looking at 1 million subscribers, on average, those people have generated 3,873 videos.
Shit, I wasn't expecting that. Wow.
Yeah. So it takes time. It takes that consistency that we're talking about.
Surly Dev, I appreciate your commentary in the chat right now. Surly Dev said, you assume we care now, meaning when I was saying people didn't care about my content before, and I'm assuming that they care now.
Oh yeah.
Didn't then, still don't. And I said, yeah, so true, but you're here listening. So, and they said only because Goose is not streaming right now. Love it. What
he is going to be streaming later today though, so you should.
There you go.
Check out his.
And our friend AJC said, well, what if I want that same success, but without all the work? How do I do that? That's like, you hear people, I think a lot of people that don't have direction in their career, they do a lot of like jumping around from idea to idea, thinking they're going to follow this, like, I'm going to go and do this thing. And I heard people make, so much money within 6 months or whatever, which is why like pyramid schemes exist. Cause it like sounds really tempting, but anything that you want to get that out of is just, if your plan is to get that in 3 months or something, it's just not really, it's not realistic. And it's hard. I don't know. I have this bigger, really in-depth thought in my head that I can't quite articulate, but like any significant change that you want to make in your life or your career, it just doesn't happen overnight. It's got to be an intentional thing that you work towards and you grind towards to make that difference, whatever it is. Like it's a long process for any significant change, whether it be work-life balance, money, the job that you do, like the excitement for changing careers, spending more time with your family, like whatever that is, like it's a journey. It's never one of those things that's just an easy fix. If something seems like an easy fix, it's probably actually too good to be true.
Yeah. I'll give you a quote, James, that you can quote me later on.
Yes. Can't wait to take this to my house party the other day.
Take notes. Yeah. Write this down. Anything worth doing in life is worth doing. Like it's worth putting in the
Yeah.
time and the effort.
Yes. Yeah. I love it. This is good. I appreciate all the fun
Mhm.
commentary as well.
And I like the smack talk.
Oh, I do
Says
too.
James.
I like there's nothing better than feeling comfortable enough with friends to be able to do that. I absolutely love that. People that are shit talking in the video that I've referenced a million times, I do not love that. So thanks for not doing that.
So when is it okay for us to talk smack about that?
You
Like,
can
it
because
still
we
feels
have
too soon. Oh, it
we
still
have
feels a little
no
soon.
we have
Okay.
yeah, do what you got to
Okay.
do.
Okay.
Because the thing is, so here you're bringing me back to
I'm
it.
ready.
And this is, I think, something that you have to be comfortable with as you get an audience, because this is what people do, is people prejudging the reason why I created that video and
Mm.
assuming that the reason I created the video that I tell them is the reason is me actually lying to them and I'm a different person.
Oh,
Because
oh,
I
no.
said, here's a product I think is worth people checking out. And they
Yeah.
immediately go to, I must have an affiliate link, which I don't. I actually was offered an affiliate link and I turned it down because that's not why I did any of this. I'm only doing this because it's a friend. No, I just met the guy. He's cool. He built a cool thing. I want to share. Like, the thing that annoys me is people pre-assuming who I am, which again, I think is something, as you have more of an audience, you have to be comfortable letting go. But I'm always really defensive about how I come off to people. Like, if you have feedback for me and I'm not doing something the right way, please actually let me know. But if you're just making assumptions about who I am and then instigating that, I hate that. But again, people are people and there's only so much you can do about it. So
Yeah. If there's a character and integrity piece coming into it.
yeah. The shot at my character and integrity is that I'm here to like make money and promote something that's not valuable, which I don't think I'm doing. Here's a question though, if you want to take this one.
What are your go-to sources for keeping up with the ever-changing web development world? This is fantastic. So we it
I'm
feels
laughing
weird.
at other comments, but keep
Well,
going.
I'm laughing because you were ranting about like money and things like that, and I'm about to reference a sponsor.
Nice.
So, like,
Do it. Oh, a good, a perfect sponsor. Please continue.
it is a
Actually,
good
two of them.
sponsor. Yeah. So a great one is daily.dev, and this is a Chrome extension that I seriously use it. It's not because they've been a sponsor in the past, and they just got a bunch of funding. But anyways, every time I open a new tab on my browser, their site loads up with several different articles that are popular for the day. So that's a great way that I've been able to keep in touch with top tech trends. And the good thing is you can also put on there things that you're interested in. So I'm not that big on Web3, so that I didn't check that, but I checked other things like Jamstack or UI UX or startups and things like that. Another great one is Hashnode. And actually, they are a sponsor, but Medium and Daily, no, not Daily Dev. I just talked about them. Dev.to, they also send out newsletters aggregating content from the community. So we love Hashnode. We're big fans. I have several posts that I've written on Hashnode, but they also have a write-up. So if you go to their website, there's a stream there of recent content. It's another good way to stay up to date.
I am trying to do a mod rats. Shoot, where are the mod commands?
You don't want promotion for your channel?
You're right. We should leave that on here. Where are my freaking
Man. I was gonna say we did have a question earlier where someone said that they had just gotten their first sponsor, and if we had any tips, it sounds like that would be a great a great bot to reach out to. We kind of talked about this earlier, but just consistency is a huge thing in terms of consistently providing that value for your channel. And I know that seems maybe like a cop-out answer, but that really does just encourage and trust over time. Encourage trust over time, because you're going to show up every whatever cadence you've communicated.
Yep. We talked about this a lot too. Is just asking. Most people don't ask. And if you never ask, you will never hear yes. So part of it is just asking and figuring out like what's the value for people. What are companies looking for? What do they want to get out of it? And then how could you maybe tweak some of the things that you do to be more of a specific fit for that. But like
Mhm.
let's celebrate like where I didn't have these ready, but let's celebrate the first. There it is, the first sponsor, because that's amazing. And
Mhm.
it really does feel like after you get one, you kind of realize the value of sponsorships,
Mhm.
and I think you think about that a little bit more.
Oh,
So
I was
anyway, I
thinking
think
like
asking,
individual sponsors. I don't know why.
what do you
That's where
mean?
I was getting with the consistency piece. I thought that he was referring to like an individual sponsor that, because can you have like a stream sponsor where like just one person gives you money?
Oh yeah, you can have yeah. So
I
and
wasn't thinking corporate sponsorships, but
right,
yeah,
okay.
asking's huge. When we
hmm
started the podcast, a bunch of people were like, "How did you have sponsors out of the gate?" And I was like, "Well, we asked."
We send emails.
Yeah.
And it is amazing that they're like, um, there are a lot of dollars to be spent in that sort of stuff, in sponsoring content, like a lot of dollars that companies are spending. And sometimes I think you'll be surprised at how quickly sponsors are willing to spend money.
Mhm.
I'm gonna come full circle. So going back to the question of how do we stay up to date with stuff,
Mm.
Twitter, Discord,
Mhm.
newsletters. I'll come back to that in a second. Um, Daily.dev, Hashnote, Dev.to, amazing resources. I got a request for a sponsorship from This Week in React newsletter. To be 100% transparent, I haven't taken any money from them at all. But it's a React newsletter that I signed up for after he reached out, and I was like, "Huh, this is actually really valuable. I am subscribed. I will get these every week with articles and jobs and just like relevant news for React." And so the person wanted to ask about like, can we do a sponsor tweet? And I was like, let's just do a tweet. Like, this is a good product. This is a good thing. People should know about this. And anyway, so I was like, I'll just tweet about it, and I will share about it in this conversation that we're having. So it is. If anybody has the link handy, actually, can I grab the link and I can put it in there? Here is a tweet that people can check out if you're interested. If you think this is a useful newsletter, go and sign up. If you don't think it's a useful newsletter, don't complain at me that I shared it because I thought it was. This is going to be part of my like attitude from now on. Anyway, I thought it was cool. And so they're like, it's not a money thing. I just thought it was a useful resource and I'm happy to share it. And I think two things going back to the sponsor conversation. If you have companies that have lots of money and they're not willing to pay for your services, which you provide a service, whether it's sponsor stream or tweet or whatever, blah, 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 that's not someone that I want to work. Like, I'm just not going to give out free value for no reason. But especially when it's solo creators, people that built something from scratch, people that put their blood, sweat, and tears to stuff, and I think it's valuable, I am extremely happy to help share that stuff because it's valuable for the community. And this is one of those things. So anyway, if you enjoy it, subscribe. If not, cool too.
Um,
Awkward silence.
well, I was
What was the
responding.
day that you whispered to me for? You remember that? What was that? Secrets? Is that what it
Oh,
was?
yeah, yeah. So, I'll explain that, and then do we wanna finish? This is
This is
incredibly
so long.
long.
I'm
I know.
Me being able to rant on stream
Oh, man.
has been such a good outlet for me.
Very helpful.
Can you tell what's been
Oh,
top of mind for
man.
me like the last couple of
I'm so
weeks?
sorry. Um, okay, so I let's see. My mind is going to I'm totally derailed. We did an episode on, is that authentication, authorization, and
Mm,
environmental variables and secrets. And so, right before we got ready to record that episode, I told James, if you play Jackbox on like Xbox or PlayStation or
mm.
wherever, there's a game called Espionage, and one of the characters, when you choose it, it just like whispers secrets, secrets. And so, whenever we were recording that episode, I told him I was just going to whisper secrets like throughout the entire episode. The other thing I was gonna highlight, and this is kinda jumping around, there's really no transition, but Josh Goldberg, who we've had
Yeah.
on the podcast before, was just saying that he was interested in starting his own podcast, probably not this year, but what was the process like, and do we have any tips and tricks? So I included a few links. For a while, I was gonna put our newsletter episodes on the Compressed FM website, really, I just put the first 3 up there pre launch, but you can go on there and see what that process looked like for us and some of the things that we were getting in place. So there's process stuff that you can set up to make it easier. And I think we even have an episode that we did early on that was very meta, where he talked about the tech behind it and some of the things that went into it. And I can include a link for that as well.
We'll say there's a lot that goes into it. I think that's like worth calling out.
Processes make it easier though.
Yeah. And recording the content is a relatively small piece. Like that's a big
Very
piece of the
small.
output, but it's a relatively small piece of the actual process. So I would keep that in mind. I would try to simplify it as much as you can to start. This is like my advice for content creation across the board, going back to consistency, is make the process as simple as you can. And maybe that means getting rid of features and getting rid of ideas initially and build that up to a consistent level, and then add on stuff later on as you have maybe more time, maybe more capability, or maybe you specifically have more time because the other pieces have gotten easier because you've done them 50 times by publishing episodes, and you have less that you're actually learning each time. So yeah, I would just try to make it simple. There was, I do. So one learning for me, by the way, is from my perspective, when I watch content, when someone says a video is sponsored, this is not me like super ranting. It's just like a learning, like an actual reflection of things that I need to adjust based on feedback. When I watch other people's channels with sponsored content, that doesn't turn me off from the content. It's a reality that people get sponsored. And for me, take it off my chest. For me, when I do sponsor content, it's always stuff that I already would be excited about. It's just a paid opportunity to prioritize time to do that thing. So there's not been one piece of sponsor content I've ever done that I wouldn't, like, if I had infinite amount of time, that I wouldn't already have like spent some time exploring with. But the perception for a lot of people is not that. Like, they get turned off from sponsored content. And so I think I've like hit a limitation of, I think I've done too much. Again, learning for me. So I'm really starting to pare that down, and figuring out how to message sponsored content is a challenge as well, because I've done a few different, like, trying to be creative ways of incorporating sponsors into video content. And some of them have done better than others, but Jess and like other kind of like my own reflections and stuff kind of called out, like, getting away from the core stuff that has made my channel, which is core JavaScript stuff and VS Code. To be honest, like, those are the two topics that really dominate. So now, one, I'm going to be intentional about having less sponsors, and also more intentional about bringing them into core topics like VS Code and then core JavaScript stuff in general. And the other thing I'm doing is actually moving more sponsorships to live streams, because people have responded relatively well to sponsored live streams, and being more open to like seeing and paying attention to the things that are going on, and not just tuning out because I've got a sponsor on. So that's what I'm trying to do less, and then position them in a little different way, and then focus more on the live stream portion of sponsored content and less about the dedicated videos for YouTube.
I think, we've gotten several questions over the course of the last hour and a half about content creation and, in this case, sponsored content. And I think, it just goes to show it's all an experiment, and things change. And like topics change, different things change, the economy changes. And so it's all about being willing to experiment and see what works for now, might not work later. And you just are willing to continue to experiment, see what that looks like.
Yep. Technical question from Scion. Can an Express API return a video to the client? Only worked with JSON. So yes, you're more into like the stream aspect of that, like returning a stream for the video content to come through, and it wouldn't be like a JSON object. In theory, you could take a video just like you could an image and actually translate that to bytes and send those direct. Or I guess you could like send them as a JSON object too if it was a really tiny one, I guess. But you'd have to get into like piping and streaming content back to a client if they're requesting that sort of stuff. I think we gotten to the point where we've like answered questions and stuff. Oh, I feel so much better.
Do we need to do picks and plugs?
We can
I'm-
probably skip.
I
Yeah.
was gonna
It's
say, if you
been-
wanted to pick Polypane, I mean,
So there's this new browser that I don't know
I'll
who
pick
created
Tizzy.
it, and
You do
I
have
have
to
no
pay for it.
association with them.
Yeah.
But it is awesome. Check out Polypane.
Oh, goodness. And I would say for the plug, so for not doing this, we're doing it. I would say check out the Learn, Build, Teach Discord. James mentioned earlier, we're trying to help people that would want to create content and have some kind of accountability there. So I'm going to contribute in that way as much as I can.
Yep. Love it. Check out Learn, Build, Teach at learnbuildteach.com. Thanks as always for people joining us, questions, commentary, making fun of James. I love those people.
And supporting Amy. I love that.
Yes, and supporting Amy and putting my ego in check. I appreciate all of the above. This is a ton of fun. I enjoy. We talked about kind of doing more of these, and I feel like, Amy, sometimes we just don't have enough time to like, guests are awesome, but like just for us to kind of riff and talk with each other is always nice, and we enjoy it. So this was a particularly fun episode. Hopefully people enjoyed it on the podcast. If you're listening in a podcatcher and you enjoyed it, leave a rating, review, help us help other more people find the podcast so they can listen and we can have amazing guests on and do all the things that we already doing. Just continue to do it. That was my best outro ever. In the meantime, that's all we got. Nailed it. So good.
Yeah, nailed it.
I'm so good at speaking.
I'm so good at speaking. Our faux goodbye.
That's right. This is one of 5 goodbyes. Yeah. Do we can kind of return the favor. Let's see. Can I get out of mod view? Turn on shield mode. I don't even know what shield mode is. Does anybody have a name? I can't see like who's live.
I was gonna say I like that command down there. Faux goodbye command.
Oh, nice.
That would be fun if we
That's a good
had
idea.
some kind of bot. Yeah.
How do I get out of mod view for this?
I don't know the back end of Twitch. Every time I stream, I just hope nobody crazy gets on because I don't know what I would do.
Pray for the best. Does anybody have a name of someone that's streaming on Twitch that I could raid over to?
Clarkio, we usually
he is. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna open up a new tab. Yeah, Clarkio is on, so I'll send everybody over on Twitch to Clarkio. Let's initiate that.
Awesome.
Cool. Should take a few seconds, but head on over to Clarkio's channel. He's awesome. Thanks again, everybody, for hanging out with us, asking questions, making fun of us. Appreciate it.